Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Simone here. So today I'm going to be filming my September wrap-up, which is all the books I read in September. Now I'm just going to warn you, this is going to be a really long video because I've read 20 books this month, which I'm very impressed with. I did not expect to read that many, so that's pretty cool. So I would say if you're going to watch this video, get like a snack, a drink, put your feet up, just enjoy. I hope that you like it. The only problem I'm going to have is some of these books I read like obviously a month ago, but I now can't really fully remember them, so I'm going to have to just rely on my Goodreads, which is currently sat here, so I hope that's okay. But yeah, I think once I start talking about them I'll remember what I'm talking about, so don't worry about that. Also, the lighting might not be great because it's currently 8:01 in the morning and it is pretty gross and grey and rainy and that outside, and obviously all the cars keep going past, which makes that horrible noise that you can hear. So sorry about that. Let's get started. So the first book I read this month was The Three by Salems Lot. This is a book where 4 aeroplanes crash at exactly the same time around the world, and of these planes, on each plane there is one survivor. On 3 of them they are young children, and on 1 of them is a slightly older lady. I say older lady, she's like in her 20s, but I mean she's older than the children. But she is alive long enough to leave a message on her, like to record herself on her phone, giving a warning basically. And then it's about these are 3 that have survived and the things that happen. I was really impressed with this book. I gave this a 3-star, I think, because it was a little bit the storyline was very religious in parts. Like there was a big thing about certain people saying that these children were the 3 horsemen. Now I don't really know a lot about that. I'm not a religious person, so I don't have quite much knowledge about those things. So that's why I gave it 3 stars. But what I did love about this is it's set, or it's made up of lots of different types of media. So one thing I'm really looking forward to is reading Illumine, because I've heard that it's mixed media, but this one was also the same, which I didn't know going into it, which I was really pleasantly surprised about. But basically this was made up of like transcripts and emails and text messages, and it was basically like parts of interviews that the main character or the author of the book, it was basically a book that had been written, and it was the author of that book that was doing the interviews, and so that was kind of what you were getting throughout, which I really liked. And yeah, like I say, I gave this a 3-star. It wasn't my favourite, but it was really kind of thrilling. I will say it wasn't particularly shocking. I think that if once you read it, kind of as you got through it, it was leading to a point that you kind of knew, so I don't think it was particularly shocking, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. The second book I read this month was NYPD Red 4 by James Patterson. You'll all know, if you watched my August wrap-up, which I'll link below, that I read NYPD Red 3 last month, and I've read the other 2 previously. I really like this series. It follows an elite investigative department of the New York Police Department. Basically they are there to solve these crimes that are dealing with high profile people or celebrities, and it goes from there really. I don't want to go into this one too much just because it is the 4th one in the series, so I obviously don't want to spoil it, but it follows the 2 main characters of Zach and Kylie, who I really like the characters. I like their relationship, I find that interesting. One thing I wasn't a massive fan of, and is the reason why I gave this a 4-star rather than 5, was because one of the main characters, Zach, and actually Kylie, to be honest, the personal lives of both of them started to really drag out to me. I feel like it's the same issues that they were having as they've had in the previous books that I've read in this series, and I did start to get a little bit irritated by that. But other than that, it was really great, and yeah, it's a brilliant continuation on the series. The next book is a book that I was recommended from, I can't remember where from, but I remember seeing this book somewhere and thinking I'll give it a go and see what I think, because it's not something I normally pick up. And this is On Dublin Street by Samantha Young, and this is the first in the, I want to say it's like the Dublin Street series. I know there's more books in the series. I can't quite remember what the others are. oh, it's the On Dublin Street series, and there's like Down London Road, Before Jamaica Lane, and many more. So this was really funny because I was trying to explain this to my boyfriend, whose channel I'll link below. And I was telling him that basically, when I was about 150 pages into this, I said to him, this is basically like 50 Shades of Grey without the sex. And it's this like high profile, you know, wealthy guy trying to essentially seduce this young girl who isn't really sure of what she wants. And so it did remind me a lot of 50 Shades of Grey, but like I said, without the sex. Anyway, I told him that 150 pages, and then the next page, basically, the sex was also added. This book is, how long is this book? 350 pages, and the last 200 pages are basically just sex scene after sex scene. So if you like that sort of thing, I would definitely say give it a go. I gave this a 3-star just because, I mean, it was weird how it went from the first 150 pages of having there was no sex scenes to suddenly it just being full of them. Like, I thought it didn't seem particularly well paced to me. Obviously these types of books generally are not, they're not there for the pacing, I guess. It's about the sex a lot of the time. But I will say I really liked this. I would continue the series. I did find the main character at once unlikable, but also quite endearing. Like, I wanted to like her even though I didn't particularly enjoy like her very much. She was quite standoffish, I felt. But I kind of wanted to because I felt sorry for her. Well, not sorry for her, I kind of pitied her a little bit. But yeah, I will say it was an interesting one. And I would say if you liked 50 Shades of Grey, you're going to like this one too. The next 2 books I read were massively disappointing, and I gave them both 1 stars because I just didn't like them. The first one was Secrets of Eden by Jolyon. I got this from the library, and I talked about this in a library haul, which again I'll link below. I didn't like this at all. The synopsis of this sounded right up my street. It's basically about a woman who, after she gets baptised, her body is found in what appears to be a murder-suicide, where her husband has killed her and then killed himself, but then when they do some kind of investigation, they find that actually he couldn't possibly have killed her. Now, that sounds right up my street. Like, that sounds like it's like a thriller kind of thing. I like domestic thrillers. It was really interesting, and I would assume that I would love it. And then I read the first like chunk of it, and it was so much about religion. But I don't mind having religion in books, like, don't get me wrong. Like, if there's religion in books, it's not like I automatically go, I hate this, and turn it off. It's just that this was like solely religious, and to the point where the storyline sort of seemed to disappear, like it wasn't really there, because it was just talking about the religion and the things that you know, had been sort of told to them, and I wasn't there for it. I didn't care, and I found myself skipping big chunks of it because I just wasn't interested. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this personally, and I mean, I don't think I'm going to give this another go. Then the 5th book I read this month was another one that I really didn't like, and that was The Way of Kings Part 1 by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first part of the Stormlight Archive series. Now, I want to preface this by saying I am not a high fantasy person. Like, I do not tend to enjoy high fantasy. However, I'd heard so many good things about Brandon Sanderson's writing that I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go and just see what I think, because it's a library book, so it's not like I've spent my money on it, and I want to see if his writing is kind of all it's hyped up to be. And it just wasn't for me. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a high fantasy fan. I don't really tend to pick those books up. I didn't like it very much, and I will say that I might give it a go in the future if I kind of read some more high fantasy and enjoy it, but for now it's really not for me, and I'm probably not going to revisit it. The next book I read was Viral by Helen Fitzgerald. Now, I saw this video on Lauren in the Books channel, who I'll link below, but she said that she really liked this, I think, so I thought I'll give it a go and see what I think. I like the premise of this book. I didn't particularly enjoy the execution. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. This follows a girl named Sue who goes abroad on holiday, and while she's there with her sister, something happens and basically she is filmed performing multiple sex acts on these different guys in a club. And then this video goes viral, and so she essentially runs away because she doesn't want to deal with it. And it's about the it's about the legal side behind it, it's about the social aspects, it's about kind of the aftermath of these things happening basically. And like I said, the premise was great. It kind of reminded me a bit of, what's the book? I can't remember the name of the book. It's the one by, I'll put it up here because I can't remember what it's called or who it's by, which is really, really helpful. But it really reminds me of that book, so I hoped that I would really like it. And it just, I don't know, there's something about it that was a little bit awkward and it didn't flow very well for me. I found it a bit bitty, and I don't know, like I felt like some of it was kind of unrealistic and it just didn't quite work in my image of what was happening. And so there's something about it I just didn't like, and basically I think it was the writing style and just the way it was kind of put together. I just wasn't a big fan. So yeah, I would say there are definitely better ones. Asking for It by Louise O'Neill, that's the one that I'm sure I put up earlier but I've just remembered. But it reminded me of that because it has similar aspects, but I feel like that book, Asking for It, was much better written, and I much more enjoyed it than I did Viral. Then I read a book that I'm very excited about because it was my next Stephen King book, and this was Salem's Lot. Now, I had sort of heard the name of this book a few times before, but I hadn't really, didn't know anything about it. But this is basically Stephen King's vampire novel, which is so different from like traditional, or like how you think of vampires. Like, this is not gonna be your sort of light and fluffy vampire novel. This is kind of, you know, people die. Like, this is not a case of everybody lives and, you know, lives alongside the vampires happily. Like, that's not how this goes. It's a Stephen King book. Like, it was never going to end that way. But basically this follows a man who called Ben, who he's a writer, and when he was younger he used to live with his aunt in this town basically called Jerusalem, or Salem as they call it. And basically, or Salem's Lot should I say, not Jerusalem. And it was named after a pig called Jerusalem, so that, I find that really funny anyway. But basically he lived on this, in this town, and something happened when he was younger, and he goes back to this town sort of 20 however many years later, and he wants to write a book about the place that he grew up. And then it becomes more and more kind of damning, and things start happening, and I loved this. It was great. I gave this 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars only because I didn't love this quite as much as some of his other books, but I really, really did enjoy it. And I'm currently trying to work my way through Stephen King's books, so I'm really glad I got another one done. And also, this was quite a big book, but it really didn't take me that long to read, so I feel like his books are quite well paced, and there's always something happening, so it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I'm bored, like, move on. But no, I really liked this one. The next book I read was the first part in a duology, which was Honeymoon by James Patterson, the first book in the Honeymoon duology. And I gave this book a 4 star. I did really enjoy it. I also have the second one, which I'm hoping to read quite soon. This follows a woman called Nora Sinclair, who seems like your normal girl until things start happening to the men in her life. And this FBI agent named John O'Hara starts to become a little bit obsessed with her, and it's about their relationship and the journey that they have and the things that she does. Like, this is so good. I really liked this book. It was great. It's really fun to read. Like, it's not going to be one of those books that stops your life, or like, you can read it really quickly. It's just one of those fun books that's just enjoyable, and lots of people I think must like this too, and I just think it's great. And it's got everything you need in it. It's got murder, it's got deceit, it's got FBI stuff. I love this, and I would definitely recommend, if you haven't read any of James Patterson's books, I would definitely say give that one a go because it was great. The next book I read, I finished in a day because I just wanted to find out what happened, and this was How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. Now I believe this came out this year, but I was recommended this by Laura from Two Paper Girls, whose channel I love, by the way, which again I'll link below. But she was talking about how she'd read this book in, I think, August, and so I was like, I need to read that, so I ordered it from the library, and it was great. This basically follows a man who, for every 15 years of his life, he ages a year. So he was born like 200 years ago or something, and but he's only like in his like 30s, something like that, and it's really, really good. I gave this a 4-star because I really loved it. I found it really interesting. It really gave me like the memories of when I read the first 15 Lives of Harry August, which I really, really loved last year. Was that last year? I think I read that. But I really loved that book as well, and I feel like this was a book which a lot of people will like, but it's kind of that, has that time element without it having to be like time travel so much. It's just that sort of like time is not quite what you think, and it was great. I really enjoyed it, and I have never read a Matt Haig book before this, so I will definitely be reading more of his because I loved it so much. And then the 10th book I read this month is a reread, and I've read this before and really liked it. Again, I gave this a 4-star, and this is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I talked about this in my, I want to say it was like my autumn TBR, which again, I'll link below, everyone. I was saying how I'd read the first Lord of the Rings book, and I didn't want to read the second one just yet because they are like mammoth books, but I wanted to stay in the world, and so I wanted to reread this one because I hadn't reread it in a while. I love The Hobbit. I've really liked all the films that have come out of this as well. There's just something nostalgic about this book, and just something that I enjoy a lot, and my boyfriend bought me this copy actually. I think it was for my birthday like 3 or 4 years ago, but I really, really loved this, and I would say if you are trying to read Lord of the Rings and you're kind of sort of falling a bit short of it, I would say definitely give The Hobbit a go because I find it much easier to read. Yeah, it's really, really good, and I love it. So my camera just cut out, and I'm also boiling, so I just took my jumper off, so that's why I look different. But anyway, so the next book I read was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, which is part of the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, which I'd never read a Laini Taylor book before either, and when I read this month, I gave this a 4-star. I've given a lot of books 4-star this month, I've noticed. But this was amazing. I really enjoyed this. It's not something I would ordinarily have picked up either. I actually went into my local library, and they have like a quick choices. They have like 10 books that they love and they think that you'll love. So, and I saw it on there, and I thought, actually I've heard loads of things about this and I think I might pick it up. But this follows a girl who doesn't really know too much about what's going on, like about her life, kind of her childhood. She basically works for a man who grants wishes in exchange for teeth, and she doesn't quite know what's happening or why he needs the teeth or what he needs them for, and then something happens, and basically the portal to where she lives and the place where this man lives, they are burnt essentially, and she can't get to him, and so she then has to try and figure out a way of getting back there and to sort of find out what's going on. This is kind of like an angel story, where I think the angel's supposed to be the bad guy initially. Whether it continues that way, I won't tell you. But I really, really liked this. The romance in it was really sweet as well. I did see the twist that comes about halfway through. I did kind of see it coming, but it didn't make it any more, like any less exciting or any less sort of great. So yeah, this is one that I do plan on continuing the series of because I really liked the first one. The next book, I was watching a video by Hannah Tay where she talked about Anne Cassidy and her writing, and I really enjoyed it to the point where I decided to pick up the first one that she talked about, which was Looking for JJ, which is the next book I read this month. This actually I gave 5-star because I loved it so much. Now basically this follows a woman who, when she was a young girl, She was known as JJ, or Jennifer Jones, and she killed another child, and obviously she goes to prison or to juvie or whatever she goes to, and then she has now come out of prison and basically is trying to build a new life for herself. Now she's an adult, and then it's about how the journalists are trying to find out who she is and how she's sort of being found out and the things that she's getting on with in her life now. And I really, really liked this. I find this a really interesting subject because I feel like it's quite emotive. Like, when we think about children killing other children, firstly I'm like, I don't understand, and I struggle to understand where that compulsion comes from, or just generally like why that happens. And then it's that whole, can they be rehabilitated to the point where when they come out they're not going to be a danger. It sort of brings me in mind of the whole, is it the Jamie Bulger case, which was terribly sad. 2 boys killed Jamie Bulger, who I think was 3 at the time, and they have been released, and then there's been a lot of kind of backlash around that and things. So I feel like this is something that could actually happen in real life, and I personally felt like this was really dealt with well, and I enjoyed the book. I think Anne Cassidy's writing is great, and I would like to read more of her books because I did enjoy this. So I would say thank you to Hannah for recommending this, because I wouldn't have known about her without the recommendation. The next book I read was another James Patterson, because I do love James Patterson, and this is The Quickie, which sounds weird, but it is what it is. This basically follows a woman who spots her husband having an affair on her. He's going into a hotel with a woman, and so she decides to get him back, she's going to have an affair as well. And then as she is at the house of this guy, something happens and he is killed, and then she has to try and deal with the consequences basically. And this was really well written. Again, I gave this a 4-star. I really like James Patterson's writing, as I've just said. I find that he can write all different types of books, and I still really want to read them, and I find them really fascinating. So yeah, for me this one was great, and I would definitely say it's a great one. And it's also a standalone, which he doesn't do very many standalones, but I find that interesting because I don't always like to start new series. I feel like there are so many of them, and I feel like I start them and then I feel like I never end them. So reading a standalone is great, sometimes just to kind of be like, oh, it's alright. Okay, I'm going to level with you for the next one. Now, I didn't fully finish this book, but I got a good chunk of the way through, and I didn't like it, and I gave it 1 star, and I don't know whether I want to continue it in the future. I really haven't decided. I don't know. This is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, I've heard nothing but good things about this book. Again, this is high fantasy, and I don't really like high fantasy, so I don't know what to do. I feel like I probably will give this another go at some point, because I can't not in some ways. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't fully even know how to explain what this is. This is like about a chronicler who's chronicling the life of the main character called Kvoth. I don't know how you say his name either, which is always useful. It's high fantasy. I didn't love it. I gave it 1 star. I'm really sorry if you love this book. And then I read a really exciting book, and I gave this one a 5 star as well. This is The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, also known as J.K. Rowling, and this is the 2nd book in the Cormoran Strike series. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you probably know that I love the Cormoran Strike. The first one, The Cuckoo's Calling, I really, really loved that book. And so I reread that quite recently because I wanted to continue the series. So I finally did, and I loved it. I wasn't disappointed. Again, I don't want to give too much away because this is a sequel. However, the story, like the case in it, is completely separate to the first one, so I don't feel like I'm spoiling it. But this basically follows a private detective called Cormoran Strike, who is a veteran, and he like I say, he works as a private detective, and him and his secretary, but she's also sort of working with him in the kind of field of detecting, Robin, she's great too, and they are trying to find a man whose wife has basically come in and said that he's disappeared, Turns out that he's written a book basically which is like whistleblowing on all of these people in the publishing world. So and obviously he's gone missing, so they're like, well, where is he and what's happened? I loved this book. There's lots of twists and turns. I didn't get them, I didn't see them coming. I loved this, and I also have the third book in the series up here somewhere. What's it called? Career of Evil, and I'm hoping to read that really soon too. Also, this is one of those great like floppy big paperbacks that I love, so this was a great reading experience. The next book I read was If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, which is a book that I've been looking forward to reading, and I wasn't disappointed. I gave this a 5-star. This follows a girl who is transgender, and at her old school she was male, and so she's come to this new school and transitioned, so she's now female, and you know, just doing all the normal things that females do, and obviously things happen at the new school that she's at. So I really liked this. I really enjoy reading books about like diverse characters, so if you've got any recommendations I'd love to hear them. But I found this to be really interesting. Again, I've not had any personal experience of anybody, I don't know anybody who is transgender, so I find it really kind of eye-opening to me, because I've only ever like seen TV shows about this, and I feel like that's not very like true to life. I believe Meredith Russo is transgender herself, so this is Own Voices, and so yeah, it's really interesting, and I loved being able to read something from the horse's mouth, if that makes any sense, like from the like perspective of somebody who's actually gone through that stuff. So yeah, I really loved this, and I would definitely recommend this as a really great diverse read. Then I read The Sculptress by Minette Walters, which I gave 3 stars to in the end. This was kind of a rollercoaster read because I just wasn't sure how to rate this. This follows a woman who is a journalist, and she has had things happen in her personal life, and so her like, they call them managers, whatever it's called, her boss basically gives her the task of writing a book about this woman who is currently serving a life sentence for murdering her sister and her mother, and she's admitted to it. And basically the killer is called the Sculptress, or that's what the press has sort of called her, and she essentially butchered her mother and her sister. And basically the journalist wants to kind of get into her head and figure out why she did it, and then she starts realising that actually she doesn't think she did do it, and she's not quite sure why she confessed, and so it's about her then trying to figure out what to do and who to trust and what actually happened and who actually did it. And I really liked this. I've got a few more Minette Walters books. I've got another one here, this Gold's Bridal, which I want to read soon. I think I've read one previously as well, but yeah, I really liked this, and it's a great thriller and a kind of like murder mystery sort of thing, and it's an author that I hadn't really read much of before, so I definitely like having a new author to read. Then I have another one I didn't fully finish because this was literally awful, and I feel really bad because I was really excited about this book. This is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Now, I loved the Twilight series. I loved The Chemist, that she did, the adult novel that she's like, I think it was last year or this year that it was published. So I thought, I'm going to love The Host. I'm going to give it a go. No. I don't know how much I read of this. I can't actually remember. I think it was about like 250 pages or something. And I really didn't like it. Now, I may reread this at some point and try and give it another go, but I just wasn't feeling it actually. There's not a lot else I can say apart from the fact that I really didn't like this book, and it's about aliens, which was fine, I had no problem with that, but it was just the general plot, and I didn't like it. The penultimate book I read this month was Mortem by Patricia Cornwell, which is the first book in the Kay Scarpetta series. I've talked about this series a lot because I do love it a lot, and I decided that I wanted to start this one from the first book because I've read a lot of them, I've not read any of them in order. And it was really cool for me because like one of the side characters in this, Lucy, I've read like the 20th book in this series, and she's like a grown adult living her own life, and in this first book she's only 10. And I love to see that progression, it's really interesting. This follows a chief medical examiner, I think that's what you call it, yeah, of Virginia, yeah, Richmond, Virginia, and she is trying to solve the case of these women who have all been brutally murdered in their own homes, and basically they're trying to find out who did it, and then obviously things start to get a bit more complicated. But it's really great, and I love this series anyway, I always have. Really great thriller, really brilliant, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this series in order so I can see the progression myself rather than kind of skipping between books. And then the last book I read this month, and again gave 4 stars to because I don't obviously give any other star ratings, is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney, about a woman who's in a coma, which is one of my biggest fears of all time. But she's in a coma and she can hear and understand things that are happening around her, but she can't move, which, like I say, terrifies me. But this is about a woman who wakes up in a coma and she doesn't know how she got there, but things slowly start to come back to her, and this has the biggest twist about like 100 pages from the end, and I was shocked. Like, I did not get this, I did not see it coming. As you can probably tell from this video, I really love thrillers, and I'm usually relatively good at like figuring out what's going to happen or what's happening, and like I say, I really didn't get it on this, so yeah, it was amazing and I would definitely recommend. This is also a debut novel, so I cannot wait for more things that Alice Feeney puts out because I feel like they're going to be great. So that was my reading wrap up for September. I know this was a really long video. I hope that you've stuck around to the end. If you have, leave me a little, what emoji should we do? The little dancing emoji, leave me the emoji. And yeah, until the next time, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and press the little bell button if you want me to notifications for when I upload in the future. And until then, I shall see you next time. Bye guys.